I never thought my little slice of paradise would spark a full-blown property dispute, especially one that ended with me staring down an HOA notice while laughing so hard I nearly fell off my dock. But that's exactly what happened when the Homeowners Association of Willow Creek decided my boat didn't belong where it had been for the last 5 years. It all started on a sunny Friday morning. I was enjoying my usual ritual. Coffee in one hand, fishing rod in the other, toes dangling over the dock, waving at the occasional passing kayaker. My boat, the Lake Wanderer, had been moored there since I bought my property. I loved that boat. It was more than a vessel. It was my escape, my connection to nature, my floating office where I could think, daydream, and sometimes nap. So, you can imagine my reaction when I opened a crisp, official-looking envelope from the HOA. Dear Mr. Lawrence, it has come to the attention of the Willow Creek HOA that your boat has been moored in an area that is designated as a community access zone. You are hereby ordered to relocate your boat to the approved docking area no later than 30 days from the date of this notice. Failure to comply may result in fines and further legal action. I stared at the letter for a solid 5 minutes, then read it again, slowly this time, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Community access zone? That was my lake, my beautiful, private, slightly overgrown, algae-infested lake that I had inherited from my late uncle, who had been the unofficial king of Willow Creek. My uncle always joked that the lake was mine until the fish unionized. But apparently, the HOA had a different sense of humor. Naturally, my first instinct was disbelief. I called the HOA office and was promptly put on hold. Muzak played for exactly 14 minutes before someone picked up. "Yes, this is Diane," said a chipper voice. "How can I help you?" "I got a notice," I said cautiously, "about relocating my boat. Own the lake. This is my property. I don't think there's any community docking zone." There was a pause. Diane cleared her throat. "Well, our records show that your property line ends at the shoreline, and the lake is classified as a shared community resource." I laughed. Not a polite chuckle. Full-throated, maniacal, disbelief-laced laughter. "You're telling me that after 30 years of paying property taxes, maintaining the dam, stocking the fish, and personally preventing the beavers from turning my property into an indoor water park, that I don't own the lake?" Diane suggested, ever so gently, that I might want to review the HOA covenants and perhaps consult an attorney. I hung up, immediately dialed my lawyer, and prepared for a battle I was sure I would win. The next week was a whirlwind of paperwork, maps, and historical documents. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Mara, was equally amused and incredulous. "This is unusual," she said, raising a perfectly arched eyebrow as she skimmed through deeds going back to 1873. "But if your title includes the water rights, you might just have a legal lake on your hands." Literally. And she was right. The old deeds, dusty and slightly water-stained, clearly stated that the property included all waters contained within the bounds of said lands, including but not limited to ponds, lakes, and artificial reservoirs constructed thereon. In other words, my uncle had bequeathed me the entire lake. My heart soared. I could already see the headlines. Local HOA outmaneuvered by lake owner with a sense of humor and historical deeds. Of course, victory wasn't immediate. I had to send a strongly worded letter back to the HOA, citing the deeds, state water laws, and a few lines from the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn for emphasis. I suggested, politely but firmly, that they might want to reconsider their community docking zones, and reminded them that any attempt to enforce the relocation would likely result in me charging them rent for docking their boats in my lake. The response was predictably bureaucratic. They insisted on a mediation meeting at the clubhouse, which looked more like a retrofitted tennis shed. A dozen board members, armed with spreadsheets and a laser pointer, tried to explain that they had always assumed the lake was communal. Mara sat next to me, suppressing laughter as I outlined the entire legal, historical, and common-sense argument. After about 2 hours, the meeting ended abruptly. I wasn't sure if they were intimidated by my knowledge of obscure property law, or if someone finally realized that arguing with me about ownership of water was both futile and mildly absurd. Either way, the HOA president shook my hand, muttered something about reviewing the covenants, and promised no further action. I returned to my dock, coffee in hand, boat bobbing gently beside me. The lake sparkled like a private diamond, reflecting the golden afternoon sun. I leaned back, letting out a contented sigh. In the end, the only thing the HOA accomplished was giving me a story I would tell at parties for years. One that involved legal research, historical deeds, and the satisfying realization that, yes, I really do own the whole lake. And the lake wanderer? Still docked exactly where it belonged, glinting in the sunlight, free to float wherever it wanted, just like me. From that day on, every time a neighbor, or anyone from the HOA, saw me on my dock, they'd joke, "Better watch out. The lake owner is armed with paperwork." And honestly, I didn't mind. There's something profoundly satisfying about sipping coffee, casting a line, and knowing that the entire body of water before you is yours. All mine. The HOA eventually stopped sending letters. I suspect some of the board members still whisper about the lake incident when they think no one's listening. But as I watch the sunset over my private waters, I can't help but smile. Owning a lake might not solve all of life's problems, but it sure does make a notice to relocate a boat feel absurdly funny. Sometimes, I think my uncle is up there laughing with me, probably shaking his head at how seriously we all take property lines. But mostly, I'm just grateful for a lake, a boat, and the sheer joy of knowing that some victories are measured in water and sunlight.